Hi, everyone. Welcome to the MikeDrop podcast. This is episode 16, and it is the first in a series of podcasts titled How I Learn, and this is about Jacques Delécluse's music. I am Mike Truesdell, and I am joined via the video internet by the one and only Mike Compitello. Let's hear it for him. Here he is.
Bonjour, mon ami.
He's right here next to me, whichever side he's on.
We'll figure that part out later in post. This is going to be fun. And I stayed up all night thinking about Delécluse.
Wow.
So I'm excited to talk to you about how we learned some of this music. And in order to keep things trim, Mike and I thought we'd set a limit to our speaking.
Okay, do you think we should start having the timer like on the screen so that everyone knows how far behind we are?
I think so.
Like, should we have
That's the most Amtrak way of doing it, I think.
Like, so that the folks who are watching on YouTube can actually see the time tick down?
Yeah, how long until I don't have to watch this anymore? Like the ads when it's ticking down from 15 seconds.
Right. That's right. Yep, you got the ads. Here they come. Now they're leaving.
Yeah.
And we're going to have ads someday.
I hope so. Let's see who would want to support us. Maybe
I wonder if like an individual could get an ad. Like,
I think so.
We're sponsored by like Sally Jones of Bradenton,
I think a lot
Florida.
of people do this. Yeah, I'd like that. So if you're an individual and you want to support this podcast, either financially, in kind, or by supporting us in stopping recording, let us know.
Yeah, what's the number that someone has to give for us to stop?
I don't actually know. Is it in? It could be in flags. Number of flags. Somebody
That's
has
what we
to give
need
before we stop. Yeah.
Number of
flags.
flags.
I thought about you the other day because I was playing an orchestra concert.
Okay.
And we gotta get going. Speaking of Delécluse orchestra concert, and there was a piano concerto.
Okay.
And the piece before the piano concerto, all the strings are on stage, and then everybody leaves the stage so that they can push the piano on, right?
Right.
And then when everybody's off stage, it kind of feels like you're in Penn Station before they announce what track the train is on. Do you know that? Remember that? And then everybody sort of sprints towards it.
I know it. And then you kind of have an idea of maybe where it could be, and so you like camp out next to the 910 track.
Yes.
Right. I know the Northeast Corridor line at 237 sometimes leaves from there.
Yeah, totally.
And then it comes from track 1, and you have to like knock over babies and stuff to get there.
Yeah, I think the true insiders know.
Maybe, but
or does it change?
I think for New Jersey Transit, it changes a lot because what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, internet, but is that Amtrak has priority in Penn Station, and that New Jersey Transit kind of like has to get derailed, so to speak, sometimes because of Amtrak things. But
man. Oh,
I'm not sure.
Be a whole different podcast. Yeah.
Well, isn't it kind of like the airports, right, where you have certain hubs? Like, you know, when I was living in Denver, like that's a United place. Chicago's United. So, Atlanta's Delta. So maybe those airlines get priority in those places. I'm not sure.
I think so.
We'll say yes.
But yeah. I'm sorry to derail our conversation. So we're talking about Delécluse, and he wrote a lot of percussion music.
Yep.
And we're talking about how we learned or got to know his music. And if you don't mind, could I throw the initial beach ball onto the sand of our conversation?
I would love that.
This time? Because I've been thinking since we started doing this podcast a lot about learning music. And when we were saying how I learned something, I was thinking, if I could go back in time, I would have done it this way. Is that something that you think about?
Constantly, but I don't want to.
Knowing now?
Yeah.
Yes. So here's my outline for learning something. And then I tried to write some stuff or think about how the Delécluse stuff fits in. So, okay, step one, frame. Frame the piece you're learning. So this includes like researching the composer of the piece, getting a sense of big picture style, or where does this piece or set of pieces fit in the output of a composer? Who is this composer? Who is this composer like or not like? So you're trying to get a big picture sense, and then also start to get sort of inspired. And then analysis, which is something I know you and I bond over.
Absolutely.
So that you sort of are getting to know the piece of music on the detail level. And for me, this gives me sort of agency and authority. Like I have a reason to learn this piece. And so then I start to ask, what am I learning this for? What's the performance situation? Why am I learning it? What's going to be my interpretive angle? So that before you start playing the piece, you already have an idea of what you kind of want it to sound like. Of course, knowing that'll change. For me, the next step is planning. So I start to think, well, what materials do I need? What kind of music do I need? What kind of gear do I need? Do I need electronics? What kind of practice assistance do I need? And then based on our previous episode, I start to think about marking my part, making my part, marking my part, and getting all the logistics together in that way. And then I like to try to make a schedule, knowing that, of course, the schedule will change. So I think about, am I learning this piece and 10 other pieces, or am I learning like one other thing? What stage are these in? I try to make some sort of plan for myself. And then, of course, there's practicing. All these steps are sort of, for me, and I want to get your thoughts, they're sort of designed to make it so that when you're in the practice room, you're as free as possible. You're able to just go for it. So I like to warm up in a way that's 100% targeted towards the music that I'm playing. And then I like to try to separate technique from musical learning. So I try to do that. And then I have a lot of practice strategies, deliberate practice, self-recording, reflection. And then after that, there's the sharing side. And I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about like what you actually do in the practice room, because I thought we would talk about that.
Absolutely.
But that's sort of my framework. And then I thought about it with our friend Jacques in mind.
Sure.
But I'm curious what you think, because I know you always have a big picture idea. What's your music learning approach?
I think I'm really similar to you. The only thing that I would add, which I think we're on the same page with, is to think about prioritizing what you're learning at the moment, if you do have multiple things that you're learning, because something that's been important to me for the last few years is efficiency, but I'm not as militant about efficiency as I once was, because I feel like you can get to a point where you spend a lot of time thinking about efficiency, which makes you inefficient.
Yes.
It's too bad. But something that helps me is knowing what happens if I get gifted time.
Ooh, I love that.
It happens to us so much, right? As people who have like these packed schedules of relying on another person, and your time is taken up by that interaction with another person, the private lesson, right? So what happens if the student's not there? Now you have one extra hour. And are you going to just let something happen to you? Or are if you're a student, the class gets canceled. How are you going to use that time? So something that helps me a lot is I actually have I love my Post-it notes. I can put the projects that are in my mind right now up on Post-it notes, so that I know that if I have 5 extra minutes, then I'm going to do that number one Post-it note. And if something happens, and then maybe you can shift the Post-it notes around as to what's the most priority. I think for us, the highest priority is usually the thing that's the soonest, usually. But not always. So I would add that. And then I think when we start getting into practice room discussion, that helps a lot. And I might add to your like general researching element. Like there's the referencing recordings or videos That's all part of that. Like you're researching the composer and the piece, and that's definitely part of that, because that sometimes helps you decide on what instruments you need.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and also I agree. With the Delécluse, it's harder because there are not a lot of examples of somebody from the 1960s playing these pieces.
That's right.
But there are a lot of examples of French orchestras in the 1960s, which is kind of cool. And when we talk about other pieces, there are some great examples of the composers themselves playing the piece or something like that.
Right.
So, as a sidebar, do you find that the name brand Post-its are stickier than the generic brands? Right? Aren't they? By a lot.
Yeah. That
Wow.
what's that, like Stellite or whatever? What's the ripoff brand? I have to go straight Post-it restricted trademark.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, is that the same thing with Kleenex?
I don't think so. I think it's somehow 3M has figured out this thing.
Like
I don't know.
Yeah, because Puffs are wonderful Kleenex.
Yeah.
But I haven't met the Post-its that can affix to like the side of a building are some of my favorites.
I love that. Yeah, they can make really sticky stuff.
Yeah.
This company.
Yep.
Yeah, they can make it so that your hand will never leave that object.
And they make a whole bunch of different things. So shout out to 3M if you want to sponsor the podcast.
Yeah.
I heard that they were a Wisconsin company, and I am myself.
They're from Minnesota.
Minnesota, Midwest.
Do you know what the 3Ms are? Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing.
Oh, it's not Madison, Milwaukee, and Menasha.
Menasha. Maybe that's like another company. It's like a cookie company. 3M cookies. It's an ice cream company.
Yeah, Molly's Menasha mix.
Molly's Menasha muffin mix. 4M. Okay. Well, I was thinking about Delécluse, which I guess is Delécluse if you ask our friend Florent about it. But I was thinking about this, how so often we learn his music in the States totally like in a vacuum, right? We have the 12 etudes, or we have some other piece of his, and we'll talk about a lot of his pieces.
Yep.
But we don't think about, we bring our own background to it. Like we've grown up playing Pratt etudes or Cerrone etudes or something like that, or marching band music in general. And we don't really think about, if we're learning a solo piece, as Time for Marimba, we'll think about other Japanese marimba pieces. But with Delécluse, we don't generally think about, well, what's the context for this piece, right? Or what about this person? What kind of music was he being exposed to? Mm-hmm. What kind of clues can you give us? Can he give us about how to approach the music, like stylistically, or just learning the music? What do you think about that?
I even think, and this is a big thing that I talk about with my students, and there is a lot of grumble about it, but they even the technique, the sticking that you use.
Bingo. I totally agree. My students hate me because I'm always like, why are you using that sticking?
Yeah, why are you using flam taps? Like, why not invert?
Yeah.
Invert it.
Yeah, inverted is the way he writes it first in the method book.
Yeah.
So doesn't that mean it's the most important one? I don't know. So it's interesting. So what do you think is important to know contextually? I was sort of thinking, and I deep dove.
Okay.
So we're talking about a person who was the pianist of a orchestra.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
For many years. And I was trying to think, what music would this person have been hearing? What was the repertoire of this orchestra?
Yeah.
Right? Of the opera orchestra. Mm-hmm. So what music would this person have been exposed to? We know that he was a pianist, and we know he has a lot of music for pitched instruments. So it started to make me think, and French music in general, as we know, is quite melodic and colorful and dynamic and full of bravado. So it would stand to reason that if this person were to write it for snare drum, it might trickle sort of into the snare drum. Do you think that's something that's worth thinking about if you're just a percussionist and someone hands you a handout of one of these etudes?
100%. And I also think that there's a sonic element. There's timbral element to it.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about timbre.
Well, would you agree that in general, that French music benefits like French orchestral music benefits from a vast amount of coloristic difference, and that it doesn't necessarily always exist on this deep, round, low end that it exists in a lot of Germanic music. So for me, that's like one of the multitude of reasons that I use a specific drum and specific sticks with specific tuning when I play these etudes. And it's generally everything's a little bit higher and a little bit crisper, so that I can realize this this music in the coloristic way. But do you agree with that?
I agree totally that there's a coloristic element, but I have almost a slightly different take,
Yeah.
which is that the French percussionists that I know tend to play snare drum on drums that are actually lower tuned with like way looser snares than we play with in the States.
Okay.
And it made me think, like, why would they do that? Is that something, is that a window into how we should be playing the Delécluse stuff? Or is it just something that people are doing now?
Right.
But I was thinking, yes, color, but my thought was I want to be able to make a lot of different colors when I play. So if the thing I love about French music is how colorful and how often the beautiful orchestration changes the color of something.
Yeah.
If I'm playing snare drum, I want to be able to make a lot of different colors. So for me, it's whatever drum, I can do that. So I might actually play maybe crisply, but maybe with less of a mute, so that I can adjust more different positions on the head. But I think this is an example of how we could have exactly the same thought, but then do two different things with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think both are valid, and that's the mark of a piece that's well crafted, is that it can take a lot of different interpretations, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what else would you notice, or what else would you think people would want to know before we even like open a book?
About Delécluse and about
or just about Delécluse, about his
I think knowing the
output.
Yeah, no, for me, knowing that he is heavily involved in the orchestra is of primary importance, because not only do we talk about the little trivia games that we play of like, what theme is this and what is this based on, and that sort of thing, which may give you some sort of insight into the way that a piece could be played. I don't particularly subscribe to that, but it does give a context, like we've talked about in the past, to these etudes.
Yeah, it also gives you a sense of, I like to, when I'm learning something, I like to think about, well, what parts of this piece, parameters, should be at the front of my mind.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I'm learning this, like, is it going to be rhythm? Is it going to be color? Is it going to be, inflection? And since his etudes, by and large, seem to be ripped from the headlines of orchestra music, it stands to reason that you should play them sort of melodically. Maybe. At least I think so. Or maybe you should use the way that people play like grace notes in a piece of Ravel's or a piece of Poulenc's. Maybe that could inform how you play this. So I think there's an element where you don't need to know that it's that particular piece, but because they're all sort of like departures from that piece,
Oh yeah.
But I think knowing that there's a little bit of melodicism there, there's form, there's and there's a little bit of freedom almost, like more flute and less drumline. That's sort of my takeaway when I look at his output.
Yeah.
But that's just my thought based on looking at all sorts of his other music, because this person wrote a lot of music.
He wrote a lot of music, and for a variety of instruments for us.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that you're touching on is awesome, and that we're dealing with something that is melodic. It does have phrase markings, and one of my biggest criticisms of Delécluse is how the music is actually notated on the page. That there aren't these articulation markings. There aren't phrase markings to show us how this music is supposed to be felt. So I was looking back just a second ago at my old Delécluse Initium 4.
Yes, yeah. Uh-huh.
And that was the book that the amazing Dane Richardson had us play at Lawrence University. And I was looking back, every single etude that has a marking on it has a phrase marking on it.
Yes.
And I think
found mine
has
too,
to.
my analysis. And step one is drawing the phrase markings. I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
So I think that's a big part of it, and playing these melodic phrases. And sometimes what that means, it doesn't mean this all the time. You can play in time and play with dynamic and phrase and articulation shading. It's possible.
Mon Dieu.
Sometimes somebody will say that that's not the case, but I think going back to what you had said before, that you want to identify what is the context for which you're learning this etude. And if you're learning this etude for a audition for a specific orchestra or something, and that orchestra is only looking for exactly what's on the page, do not add anything, then you're going to practice in a certain way that leads you in that direction. That's probably going to lead you away from a melodic approach.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's just what we don't do.
Yeah. No. And I totally agree. And I find myself playing these etudes in the context of I'm playing for people that aren't necessarily percussionists.
Yeah.
So my goals are, I want you to feel the rhythmic hierarchy so it doesn't sound like popcorn popping. And I want there to be like something you can follow, something you can, I want to be able to interpret it instead of just execute it. But I totally agree. If you're playing this round one of an audition, you better make sure those grace notes are the same. But the way that I would play them, I would make no two grace notes the same.
Yeah, right.
But that's just, I mean, that's my takeaway from, the French music that I know, Delécluse's other music.
Right.
But just quickly, if we want to take a minute, can we characterize his other music? Because some percussionists don't know it. He has these books called Initium, which are rhythmic training books, right?
Yep. And it's 1 through 4. And it starts from quite basic, actually, all the way through. The way that the 12 etudes, if someone's familiar with the entire book, is not a progressive study. Etude number 1 is not necessarily easier than etude 2, let's say.
Yes.
The way that Delécluse 9 or 11 is considered to be one of the more testy, challenging numbers.
Yeah.
Number 8 is not necessarily that.
Totally,
right?
totally.
So it's not that way. That's why I love the Delécluse method book.
Yes. So that's another one. This is
progressive.
one that I think we've talked about on other podcasts. For me, method books are like gold, figuring out some ways to play a composer's music, because here is the composer telling you how to get better at the instrument.
And you see the same rhythmic motives. I mean, Delécluse is like you're saying, a very prolific composer for a snare drum, let's just say, and even though it's more than that, but let's say a prolific composer for snare drum. But there are a finite amount of these rhythmic motives that find its way into these pieces. And there's slightly different stylistic ideas, but the approach is almost always going to be identical. And where does it start? Method book, page 1.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about his method book to me is what it's not like. It doesn't look like stick control. The exercises are shorter and they're all different.
Yeah.
Exercise 11 is substantially different than exercise 10, and they're all like melodic fragments.
Yeah.
I have it open on my computer so I don't have to look at you. And, I'm looking at number 36 is da, 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 da. And number 37 is da, 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 doom. And, and for every section, he gives etudes, which are basically like emaciated versions of the 12 etudes.
Absolutely. And
right. And
by the time you get, for me, like he organizes the method book. We don't have to go through every book, but he organizes the book as like struck notes, right, left, piano forte is for the first 5 etudes. Then he goes into roll etudes, and then he goes into flam etudes only. It's etudes that incorporate loud, soft, and flams. And then he has these capitulatory exercises where we add the drags, and then it's taps, all the dynamics, rolls, flams, and drags. And then he has a series of etudes.
Friends, the recapitulatory etudes are significantly harder.
I think
the 12 etudes.
the flam etudes are the hardest things in the book.
Oh my God, I know. I'm looking at it now. Exercice récapitulatif. And they are
They're brutal.
ridiculously hard. They're really hard.
Yep.
And
so if you can get those under your hands, then you will have a sticking concept for the 12 etudes to basically get through anything. But yeah, there's the Initium. There's Cais Clariana, the books 1 and 2. Right? And then what I was just telling you, what I have here on the stand in addition to those books is the Test Claire.
Yes, another piece.
The 2-page wonder.
Yes. And then, of course, we have the timpani etudes.
Absolutely.
Which are beautiful melodic pieces.
20 etudes and 30 etudes, right?
I know, very confusing.
Yep, watch out.
And then he has the 200 daily xylophone exercises.
You bet. And timpani exercises.
And the timpani exercises. But I think our favorite is the Kreutzer.
I love these
studies. These are incredible.
What a huge oversight on his part to not include the phrase markings.
I know, what? So can you explain to our single or negative listener what this is?
Okay, negative listener out there who is probably just leaving a negative review. That's why they're negative. These are Kreutzer violin studies by Rudolf Kreutzer that Delécluse just took and put into a book that's labeled xylophone, but he changed a few of the notes. And I haven't gone through all of the book yet, but I have some of my students right now working on one of the studies, and he changed one note from a B to a D or something, but the rest of the notes, like he'll change octaves, but it's the same exact study. And in Kreutzer's original book, the exercises are working on some element of technique. It's a pinky study. It's a bowing exercise. It could be a dynamic exercise or a trill exercise. But on xylophone, it doesn't work on any of that. But there's still beautiful little studies that you can play just for fun, I guess.
Well, this reminds me of something. Well, I have two thoughts. One is the sort of what are these for question, and then there's the French conservatory tradition, which is that everybody plays a test piece at the end of the year to graduate. So we have all these pieces by Jolivet that are written as a graduation piece. And so, a piece like Test Claire would be a piece that's designed to be played to graduate.
Yep.
And whereas an American student might think, well, that means I need to play like super accurately. I think the French percussionists that I know would be like, well, that means I need more bravado. I need more scarves on this. But the second thing I thought is like etude.
Yep.
Like an etude, like you said, is generally a musical piece focused on a single idea or technique or something.
Yeah.
So are the Delécluse 12 etudes, what are they focused on?
I don't know. I mean, I know what they are for me. What as an entire book, I know what it focuses on for me, but I don't know if this was his intention or not. Maybe Mr. Rob Knopper would know. But for me, this entire book is about transition. It's all about how can I recover from one technique into another technique. How can I play a loud roll into a soft ornament? It's a slightly different hand technique. It's easy, after a certain level of training, it's easy to play a loud roll. And if you set up and do a few, you can play some soft ornaments and they're nice and clean. But the ability to play one into the other is the point of the book. Like technically, that's what I always have to work on are these little seams.
Yeah.
So,
and he does give you some clues too. He's, in the instructions where he, talks about shadings and he talks about adhering somewhat to a metronome.
Sure.
It makes you think that like, well, what were people not doing that he felt the need to write that?
Oh, yeah.
I always think about that. It's like if somebody writes, do this or don't do this, it's usually in response to something like,
somebody did not do that.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Like somebody did not keep their hammers low.
Yeah. There was a high hammer or two.
Yeah, I've seen one or two high hammers in my day.
Yeah. Do you think those pinkies were close to the keyboard? I think not.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I think for me, my thought is I want motive. I want to show the form. I want there
Yeah.
to be dynamicism, which means I have to be able to do all those technical things.
Yep.
And yeah, and I want to be able to play them stylishly so that they sound significantly different than a portrait in rhythm.
Okay.
That's my thought. That's my thought.
So-
but I think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm going to ask you a question. Is it time? If somebody were to get up and I'm going to use an extreme example, and I don't mean to single anybody out here. I look in my camera. I don't mean to single anybody out, but if someone were to show up and perhaps perform a rendition of Delécluse 1 that's similar to Marimba Lady from the Miss America pageant,
Yes.
that was 100% bravura
Yes. Yes.
and 0% accuracy and fidelity to the music.
yes.
Okay, so this is an extreme example where the faders are at their extremes.
Yes.
So in your instance, like, what's the perfect blend? Like, accuracy to the bravura. Is it like 70-30? Is it 75-25?
I think it's more of a trolley problem where I would rather somebody be able to tell what's going on and tell my phrase than comment, wow, all those flams are really clean. I would rather that.
I see.
So if you can do both, great. But I would choose phrase. But 100% bravura is not
Nope.
phrase. It's just like, I don't know, chart us in some way. I don't know what she was doing. But I would choose, for this piece, I would choose playing proactively instead of defensively.
Yeah.
This is something I talk about with my students, which is if you play, I think we might know what that means. If you play defensively, the only thing that can happen is that you're going to make a mistake and people start to count the wrong notes.
Yep.
But if you sort of say, here's how it goes, I'm in charge of this, I'm telling you the story, then it's okay if there's some bumps in the road. It also tends to make you a little bit less nervous.
Yeah.
I think, but that's just my thought. But when I was 20, I definitely did not think that way.
Well, I call it playing to win instead of playing not to lose.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
So then for you, what I'm interpreting as you say that is, I could only really come in wanting to play to win if I were 100%, 150% prepared. I knew every sticking. I knew exactly what I wanted to do shading wise. I knew what my roll bases were, the skeleton rhythms of my rolls. I had some idea of like how this formal structure fits together. I know what's going to happen on that next line when my eyes go there. So it's all, for me, the confidence comes from preparation. Do you agree?
I do, but I think people's preparation is different. So
Here we
just
go.
as an example, I 100% agree. But for example, I will change my roll base constantly when I'm playing these.
Sure.
And I might change the sticking unless it's one of those bars that's really hard.
Yeah.
So that's my thought, is that my preparation is I want to be able to do all of these things a whole bunch of different ways, because I found that personally that makes me less nervous in a concert, because if I miss a sticking or something like that, well, I've done it on my left hand. I've done it this way. Or, oh, right now it's really, I'm in a wet place. Maybe I'll stick it this way versus this way.
Yeah.
So for me, preparation, yes, but it's not, I'm only going to do it this way.
Yeah.
Which at least the way my brain works has not been helpful. But I know that for a lot of people, that's extremely helpful. Having the clarity of here's how I'm going to be doing it.
Yep.
I think that's super helpful. But I think my preparation is more, here's how I want the phrase to be.
Sure.
And, I might do this or this to get that based on other stuff. But my current goal is to be less nervous when I play. So, but I agree.
Yeah, and if you find out how to get out of every jam,
Yes.
it's actually, you're kind of like a James Bond in a way. That like, it doesn't matter if you get captured and you're in the middle of the consulate.
Yes. You can
Right.
get out. Yeah.
I know
You
how
can
to get out of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're generally in agreement, but we might do two different things.
I think because I see these less as solo pieces than I think you do.
I think so. And I think I'm angry. But I think I'm not in the situation very often where I'm playing them as anything other than a solo piece. So I love the way that the way that you sort of need to play them in other circumstances. I totally understand.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't have any problem.
Because I think there's ways, and I've seen videos of a lot of people play these as really musical studies and have them be just wonderfully clear. So I think it's I don't think it's a matter of sacrificing clarity or accuracy or technique in service of something else. I just want to make sure that the audience is very clear about that. Because I guess
the thing I was thinking of is that it would be nice if you approach them thinking a little bit about what could this have sounded like when it was written, or sort of what was sort of in the air, just because we have your background and what you've done before determines your intuition. And if you approach this where your intuition is going to do what you did in a Pratt solo or a Wilcoxon solo, I think that can lead to some pretty dead performances.
Yep.
Versus thinking, that's why I tend more towards that way.
Yeah.
Because I would rather hear, like you said, a brighter, crisper kind of energy with these pieces. But time is running out.
It certainly is. Okay.
Should we talk about actually practicing or actually learning? What do you think?
Yeah. I'd love that.
What would you do? What would you do if you could go back in time?
Okay.
And you're at the peak of your prowess and you are tasked with, for the first time, learning the Delécluse 12 etudes. You've never played them before.
I would play through the entire method book before I would tackle any one of these.
Okay.
And after I've done that, and that might take the better part of a few months, but after I've done that and I've got a concept and I've got a sound of Delécluse, for me as the guide now for myself is I'm seeing all these technical transitions like I'm talking about. So I practice incessantly on one beat or one stroke or something to try to get a feeling for what that moment is going to feel like, what that transition is going to feel like. And one of the most popular things that I try to, the times that I've taught these the most, I'm going to try to separate out the techniques. Okay, we have a loud roll that goes into a soft tap. So we're going to play the loud roll, break. Now we're going to play the soft tap. Okay, now let's try to compress these two things together and get that gap a little bit shorter and shorter until you can do it seamlessly.
Love it.
And it's a matter of he's built in all the seams, and all you have to do is go back in there and fasten them together.
Love it. But I also like this idea. Well, I love it. But you're also hinting at something that I think is important, which is separating the technique from the actual learning of the music. This is something I read about in Christopher Berg's book, Practicing Music by Design.
One of our favorites. Yeah, I love that book.
But this idea that actually scientifically it's more effective to learn technique, work on your technique separately from learning a piece of music, but you can direct your technique 100% towards the music that you're playing. Like I even wrote a little blog post about how I would warm up if I was going to play a Delécluse etude.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's called Warming Up with Delécluse. But so I agree, and I think that the actual learning of these pieces, like imagine we were starting now, the learning of the notes would not actually take that long. But it's all these little elbows in the music, so why not practice almost exclusively those? Yep.
And I think that going through the way that I would learn a marimba solo, let's say, is I would read through the entire thing, top to bottom, and then go after what the most difficult part is.
Yes.
And in this case, I think I could see something that's similar, but I wouldn't play as much of the big music for a while. Like I wouldn't play big chunks of music. I would play like in a marimba thing, I could see myself in a practice session getting to a place where I could play 16 or 32 bars or something at a time.
Yes,
in one session. But here, I think if you're going after and seeing how quickly you can get this entire piece to be something, for me, you're missing the technical point.
Yeah.
Like you're probably losing a lot of the detail of the music if you are jumping to that like phrase length of 8 bars in a row in the first week or something of your practicing.
No, I totally agree. And I would even tell, if I were teaching myself, I would say what I tell my students is make almost a most wanted list. Like, what's the list of things that are actually really hard?
Right.
And they're like on one page, and then you're like, that's what I need to be working on. Let me target that.
Yeah.
Instead of just, like you said, endlessly repeating, which can be exhausting and also really bad for your self-confidence.
Yep. And
right. So yeah.
And the most wanted list, I think, should be as specific as humanly possible. What is the thing that's difficult about that? The difficult thing is my left hand is doing a soft drag into a loud note, and it has to be early and light into a main note that's accented.
I love that. And I love that when you're practicing that, I would say, like, what if you just set a timer for 10 minutes and then you're going to do that? So that technique doesn't need to be exactly as it occurs in the music, but you could do all sorts of different things that work on that technique, because you're really trying to build mastery of the technique.
Yeah.
So that when it comes up in any guise for any piece that you're ever going to play again, you can do it.
Yep.
I think. Oh man, time's up. But I do think this is a question, which is, what are you learning it for? Are you learning it for keeps, or for a single performance or a gig?
Or is it a way to get a technique that you may not have had before? Like, is it just in service of you being better at snare drum?
Yes.
Because for us, that's what it is anymore. Like, you and I are probably not going to play these on a recital. We're going to help other people play them on a recital.
Yes, but I do kind of want to play on a recital. I
think
love
you should
to do that. And actually, my next recording, I'm going to record these pieces. So you watch out, people.
I want
It's going to be awful. The war on rolls. No. Well, one thing I'll tell my. I lost my train of thought. It must not have been very important. So if you were going to do a practice session on these pieces.
Yep.
How much time would you spend? Let's say you have 1 hour.
Okay.
And you're going to work on snare drum.
Yep.
How much time would you spend actually on Etude number 1 versus everything around Etude number 1?
I don't know if I could calculate it. I would have to have somebody there watching me calculate, because what I would do is I would do some kind of warm up to get my hands ready to go, and I'd go through kind of a normal thing, right, where I'm doing like singles and accents and doubles and rolls and whatever, and then so maybe that takes 10 or 12 minutes or something, and then I would go into the music and I would say, all right, here we go, number 1, rum. Oh, you know what, I wonder if I should work on my drags. Okay, music goes aside, out comes a drag exercise. Rum, rum, rum. Okay, different exercises. Okay, so here we go, and now the music comes back out like 2 minutes later, right? Okay, rum, rum, bum, bum, bum. Rum, bum, bum, bum. Okay, so then maybe I need to practice dynamics. And then, that's an accent there on the first note. Okay, so how's that accent going to be different? Music goes aside. Out comes the etude book. So it's going to be hard to calculate because I don't work in chunks. I work in like switching back and forth.
No, I asked a leading question. I can't agree more.
Yeah.
And I love that you're using like your diagnostic ability, this mental model, to say like, that's what I want to work on. That's the thing that's different from what it could be. And then you sort of figuring out how to work on that thing. And then I bet at the end of the session, knowing you'd have some incredibly analog way. Are you going to carve into a stone tablet what you need to work on next time?
Yep, I dictate into a parrot. Yeah, but I really think it's Delécluse practice for me. I have to know what I'm getting into. And for me, I know now because I've been doing it for whatever it is now, 25 years. But the Delécluse practice makes me burn really hot.
Yes,
so
right.
You're
vibrating.
Yeah, because I'm constantly I'm constantly analyzing, and so the CPU is working overtime.
Definitely
on Delécluse, because it's so specific and nitpicky and very detailed work that I burn really hot. So maybe I can't practice for as long of a stretch as I could if I were playing a marimba piece or if I were learning Bach, let's say. But I can. It's going to be a smaller chunk, and I'm going to have more of those smaller chunks if I want to get through the same amount of material for my lesson next week.
I can't agree more. And sometimes those practice sessions for me could look like I'm just doing rolls. I'm just rolling.
Yeah. One
Like
hand.
because that's the part that's hard. Yeah, or I'm just going,
Yeah.
you know.
And then
which
what's
is
the shape of that
really
crescendo or decrescendo?
Yeah.
Is it big? And
Yeah.
what happens if it's perfectly linear? Can I make a perfectly linear one? What about one that's
Yeah.
kind of bloated at the front and then kind of wails down?
Yeah. I love the wail down.
Yeah.
I like when it goes below than back.
Yeah.
And I've spent so much time trying to figure that out. But
Zoom. Okay, in that regard, Delécluse 9, right before the recap, the long roll.
Yeah.
Long roll down. Okay, we're soft for a bar. Then we have a crescendo to a rest that goes into the 30-second notes. What is the
Yes.
dynamic at the peak of that roll?
do you know what should it be? Or
I want to know.
What would I do?
I want to know both. It should
What
be.
would I do? The same as what you're about to get to. It should be piano,
It should be piano.
right?
But I hear so many people who bring it back up to fortissimo
yes.
or something.
Oh yeah. Why would you do that? I like to think of it as, and then the piano is like maybe like 1% softer than where you ended.
Yeah, because what you just sang feels like it's almost like the same release
yes, the
of
same,
the roll,
but it's just
and then you just drop it.
yes, that's what I would like to do. But I totally agree. You wouldn't want to go, otherwise you would have written fortissimo.
I would have seen another dynamic, and he is not prone to like an errorless piece.
No, totally.
He has many mistakes, and if you want to see, I made an errata list for the Delécluse method book.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Look at that.
And I even crowdsourced it with the amazing Keith Aleo, and he gave some feedback. But so I have a blog post on my website that is a PDF of the method book errata, if you want to see those.
Wow. So between your method book errata and my like warm up routine, I think we have some interesting resources here.
Yeah. Feel free to go get them.
Cool.
They're free, people.
So I think one thing that's interesting about our conversation is that we didn't actually talk too much about the actual specifics of the music.
Yeah.
But this preparatory phase
Yep.
is a huge element of it. But we got a lot out of it because by thinking about the type of piece it is, by thinking about his other music, we really made it so that when we're in the practice room, we're working on this instead of this.
Yep.
And then also the time in the practice room is so exploratory. I love the way you talk about practicing because it looks like it feels like it's an adventure versus sort of, and then you probably have everything you need. You got your pencil, you've got the music, you've got maybe different drums, maybe different sticks or something like that. So it's all available at any given moment. So I love this emphasis on the preparation side,
right? Because
when how you would learn it.
But it's just like what you had said at the beginning, right? That you prepare and preparation, outside the practice room, you prepare so that you can get into the practice room and you are in it.
Yes.
And it's not a time when you can sit there and you get into the practice room, you've signed it out, and you get in and you say, okay, what am I doing today?
Exactly. Yeah. I 100% agree. And it can be a place of joy, actually. Even if you don't feel like you're doing a good job, at least you're working on new things. You're trying new stuff out.
Yeah, and isn't that an addictive process?
It's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best. So I would say, I guess, as a concluding thing, since we're way over our time, like maybe we're in agreement, rapid fire, yes or no, that you're trying to learn this Delécluse's music for keeps.
Yes.
Like you want it in your bag forever.
Yes.
You want to learn, if you're going to learn one of the etudes, the 12 etudes, you should learn them all.
Yes.
If you want to play these pieces, you should be able to play them in a variety of settings.
Yes.
These are done as part of a balanced diet of snare drum and other instruments. Those are all my yes or no questions.
No.
No. Oh, that's it? You can't disagree. I mean, I think this is interesting to me because this is definitely not how I learned them.
Sure.
Like I learned them by ramming them into my head. repeating over and over and over and over and gradually getting feedback and then trying to incorporate it and then later going, I guess that's what I could have done.
Yeah.
But how about you? Did you learn these from a musically enlightened place?
No way. I learned them without having any sort of technical base or contextual knowledge. And I had a blast with them because I didn't know I was messing them up.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I don't think you are messing them up, but it just, I'm interested in this. I dare my students, I would dare them to learn like this. Like, dare you to spend less time in the practice room and more time studying or more time listening.
Yeah.
Dare you to go fly close to the sun, so to speak, and have fun learning them. And like, I think of it like, take the TV apart and don't put it together till the very end if you can.
Yeah.
If you can help it. I think that's an interesting approach to these pieces, but it's not what most people do because usually there's some time pressure. You're learning this plus like 10 xylophone excerpts. Okay. And so you don't have the time. Yeah.
Here's a thought for you for the future year jury requirement.
I love it. I hope you're going to say what I think you're going to say.
Take a snare drum etude. It could be Delécluse. It could be from like a more obscure Delécluse. And cut up each of the measures and give it to the students one measure at a time at your discretion.
Ooh.
And then at the end, like 1 week before the jury, you tell them the order of the pieces. And that's the order they have to play.
Okay.
And then that way they're actually like learning something and they can't put it all together until the very last moment.
I love that. That's actually something similar to how Steve Schick talked about how he learned the James Wood piece Rogashanti.
Right.
By making these little flashcards that were, each of them triggered a phrase.
Yep.
Maybe not a phrase, like a nugget of music.
Because it had to come back in random order. It didn't have to happen in a certain time. And
love
then you could recall based on a trigger.
I thought you were going to talk about how your current jury thing is all Delécluse number 9.
Yeah, that was my idea for this year, and feel free to steal it, anybody out there. I think that at the very least, it's entertaining to me that my students who are second years and second to fourth year undergraduate students are playing 3 solos for their jury this year, and they are all Delécluse 9s. That's Delécluse 9 from the snare drum book, Delécluse 9 from the 20 Etudes for Timpani, and Delécluse 9 from the Kreutzer Studies.
I love this. Well, because by playing all 3, by playing the timpani pieces, I felt like I gained a lot of insight into the snare drum pieces.
Gosh, yeah.
Because you're sort of like, these are pretty significant.
It's pitched.
Yeah, and they're tour de forces, I guess.
Tours de force.
Tours de force. Yeah. So did we crack it?
I don't know, but you out there, you tell us if we need to do this again. Do we need to revisit Delécluse 1? But we could go through, and I think we've got a ton of pieces that both you and I have learned in the past. And hopefully this series will take off. And we'll just come back to it when we've learned another piece.
I hope so. I mean, my hope was that we can help people not have to learn a piece of music twice.
Yeah.
Like Safa's a great example. You get to the end and then you're like, oh man, B2 needs to be next to A2.
I can't use metals. I've got to use wood.
There's an F group?
Where am I going to put it? It's got to be next to C3.
Oh no. I need 4 C's now. Yeah, so that's my hope, and I hope every one person buddy who's listening,
everybody
will chime in, and please, if you're watching or listening, let us know your favorite ways of learning these pieces.
We'd love to see them. Yeah, feel free. So for anybody who's listening on your podcast app, we have a YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel has the video version of these podcasts, and you're welcome to comment there. If you're listening, you can leave a review or a comment, and we see everything. We would love to hear from you.
That's pretty scary.
I know.
We see everything.
We see all of you.
Wow. Well, thanks, Mike T.
Hey, thanks, Mike C. Gosh, this is awesome. We could talk for hours, but the timer is up.
Yes. It went off, but we got this.
Well, thanks. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.